Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about slope-intercept form. Now, slope-intercept form is the main way that we talk about functions, which is relationships between two quantities. So, the two most important parts of slope-intercept form are, as you may have guessed from the title, the slope and the intercept. So the m in y equals mx plus b, as you may or may not recall, that is the slope. So when we say y equals mx plus b, m is always going to be the slope. I'll talk about exactly what the slope is in just a moment. And the b in y equals mx plus b, as you may have guessed, is the y-intercept. And now once we know that m is slope and y and b is y-intercept, the next thing we need to think about is what x and y equal. Those are our last two letters that we're going to replace with numbers. So y is the output, that's the vertical numbers on a graph, and x is the input, that's the horizontal numbers on a graph. M, the slope, always multiplies x. And the y-intercept always gets added to x. Once we do some things to x, our input, we're going to get out an output. Now let's talk a little bit about slope specifically. Let's talk about slope specifically all by itself without talking about y-intercept yet. In the most numerically simple form, slope is a ratio. Namely, it's a ratio between the change in y over the change in x. And the way we talk about that is usually we say slope equals delta y over delta x. That triangle right there is a Greek letter called delta. It means change in. So delta y over delta x means change in y divided by change in x. Now, I know that right now that probably doesn't make a ton of sense. We're going to talk about what that means too. Big idea on slope. All this information right here is a way of saying slope. The big idea, the concept of it, is that it's a ratio comparing difference of outputs to a difference of inputs. The y-intercept, on the other hand, that one, it's a little harder to say the exact concept, but it's a lot easier to find. A y-intercept is really just the output, which is to say y, when the input equals 0. That's when x is 0. Sorry, I recommend pausing at this time, making sure you have all of this information in your math notebook. And now we'll see an example. So let's say I've got this table and this graph. This table and this graph, I'm going to tell you right now, they both have the same information. But let's say, for example, I'm working from the table first. Now I need to know my slope and my y-intercept to make a slope-intercept form of this function, this relationship between an input and an output. So what's the first thing I need for my slope? For my slope, I need to know, well, what's the ratio of change in y, these right-hand values, to change in x, these left-hand values? Well, from 1 to 3, that's 2, right? Because 3 minus 1 is 2. Let's see if I can make that a little bigger. And from 0 to 1, well, 1 minus 0 is 1. So that's still just 1. So right now, the ratio of my change in y to change in x is 2 over 1. So I'm going to say m equals 2 over 1. Now I can simplify that because 2 divided by 1 is just 2. And the truth is, it doesn't matter which 2 points I choose, because you see how from 1 to 3, that gives me 2, and 0 to 1, that gives me 1. What if I went from 1 to 7 and 0 to 3? Well, if I went from 1 to 7, I'd get 6 divided by 0 to 3 is 3. Oh hey, 6 over 3 also simplifies to 2. It doesn't matter which 2 points I choose. I can choose whichever ones are easiest for me. So now I've got m. I need to know what b is. In this case, b is super easy. They basically just gave it to me. Because b is the value of y where x is 0. So in this case, look, there's x, there's y, b equals 1. Now, I'm ready to generalize. I'm ready to write my equation. I'm going to say y equals mx plus b, replace m with 2, and replace b with 1. Y equals 2x plus 1. Now I can find that same information from this graph also. From this graph, I am going to say, so if I've got this table right here, and this graph, I can find the same information. The truth is that the b is still super easy, because